Monica didn't want to speak, so apart from Monica, anybody else? I guess not. So we're going to start. Let me start sharing the presentation. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? You can just write on chat. Anupma, let me know in case something doesn't work, screen is not visible, or I can't be heard very clearly. Let me know.
Sure, sir.
Okay, let's start. So we're going to examine startup funding post-COVID. What is the impact? And we are not only going to look at funding, we are also going to look at what has changed in the business environment. How will you have to see yourself, your business or your enterprise that you're planning to set up differently? Because obviously it's a new normal. Things are not what they were earlier. And just to start with, to explain very quickly, what is it? Why bulletproof your startup? What's the philosophy behind bulletproof your startup? What is it that we really do, and why do we do what we do? So our understanding of the Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem, and I'm talking not just of startups, I'm talking of the entire India as a country, whether it's an SME entrepreneur, whether it's a startup entrepreneur, whether it's a micro shopkeeper, anyone. Vice was set up in September 2018, specifically to address high failure rates that has beset startups. The starting up set of premises for us was, what was our assumption? Our premise was, culturally, Indian youths are encouraged to seek jobs rather than entrepreneurship. Consequently, they are not trained or coached to be an entrepreneur. And I'll give you an illustration example to establish this for you. They are encouraged to do rather than to think and plan. Consequently, their ability to think through things and problem solve is not developed with entrepreneur mindset. So can they think and plan in a job environment? Sure, they can. But do they have an entrepreneur mindset, and can they solve more complex problems where they don't have enough information or data and no support systems? Can they really think through that? They're also taught to be more realistic than to be in touch with their emotions and follow their passions. Consequently, they would not risk all for following their dreams. And how does this affect an entrepreneur's commitment to see his thing through, what he wants to do, cannot be compromised. It has to be 100%. We, in the business world, we have a phrase saying, you have to burn all bridges so that you can't go back. And to explain this context to you, I would like to take you back to the time when you had passed 11th class and it is summer holidays and you are sitting in your room thinking about what to do during the summer holidays, how to make some money, how to try out your entrepreneurship skills. And your mom walks in, and guess what she's likely to say? Most moms likely to say. Probably they're going to say, what are you doing? Why are you not getting ready for your next year? Why are you not preparing for college admissions? How will you get a good job? What we have to remember that we humans learn from each other, and we pick up these cues from our parents, from our friends, from our teachers. What your mom just told you was it's not a good idea to think and plan. She doesn't know you're thinking and planning to do a business. But the very act that you're not doing something, you don't have a book open in front of you, you're not preparing for something, worries her. So this is what I mean, the emphasis is on doing rather than thinking and planning and then executing. And it didn't even occur to her to tell you that, okay, if you want to start a business, this is what you need to do. Now imagine if you tell her that, you know what, I was thinking of setting up whatever your favorite thing is for the next 2 months in the summers, holidays. If you're in Bangalore, maybe you want to set up an idli stand outside the house. If you're in Delhi, maybe you want to set up a chaat samosa stall in the market and make some money. And you tell your mother that you're going to do this. what is the most likely comment she's going to tell you? She's probably going to tell you, are you gone mad? Why will you not prepare for IIT? Why will you not prepare for medical? Why will you not prepare for whichever college your family wants you to go to? And families in general want to push you into safe job situations. As a consequence, you never think through what would it mean to set up a business. You're not trained for it. So this is our premise about the Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem. What's our understanding of the Western entrepreneurship ecosystem? Let's look at that. Youth are encouraged to be entrepreneurs from their childhood if they show inclination and initiative. And we have so many examples of kids going and working on petrol stations, kids going and working in malls when they get to their high school age, working age, 16 plus. There are so many examples of kids in US who started a business at the age of 11 or 12 and made it into a successful enterprise. The best example I have in my mind is a gentleman called Bill Gross. Bill Gross set up a candy stand at age of 12 next to a bus stop. And his first investor was his father. His father gave him $100 as seed capital and negotiated a 25% share of profit with his son. What did he just do? He told him that great idea to become an entrepreneur. And guess what? Money doesn't come free. Bill Gross went on to be one of the most successful serial entrepreneurs. He today runs an incubator called the Ideas Lab, where again he has set up series of successful startups. The Western culture makes liberal use of thought frameworks, business models, business tools, and coaching. We will happily take coaching for maths because it will help us get a job. But we will not take coaching for running a business. There is no experience in your lifetime which has prepared you for doing a business. Yet you will not take coaching for that. That is amazing. You want to join the Indian cricket team, you will pay for coaching, pay through your nose. But some of our business, it doesn't occur to you that you need coaching. Why is that the case? The reason for that is most of us in India are not even aware how complex and difficult it is to set up a business. And which is why need for thought frameworks, need for business tools, business models, and coaching becomes very important. And in the Western culture, they make liberal use of this. A very high degree of customer centricity and value creation. I mean, you look at an American businessman, his customer focus is so strong and value creation focus is so strong. I have, in my personal experience, found this missing in Indian entrepreneurs' mindset. We talk about it, but our commitment is not at the same level. They have highly evolved communication skills and marketing capability. Our experience is that most Indian entrepreneurs don't have a very good communication skill and marketing capabilities. And the reason for that is that in order to be a great communicator, you really need to be in touch with yourself, your emotions, your thought processes, your ability to express what you're feeling and what you're sensing. And in the Indian culture, you're taught not to be in touch with your emotions and feelings. If you told your parents that I want to follow my passion of wildlife photography, most likely parents are going to tell you how you gone nuts, what are you going to earn, how are you going to survive? Because these are very non-traditional earning opportunities for your parents, for people around you, and they get worried about you. So the first impact that COVID is going to have and what technology is doing to us is that jobs are going to become rarer and rarer and rarer. So you will have to start thinking about setting up your own business. So what is our problem statement? This is our problem statement. In order for the Indian startup entrepreneur to be successful, He needs to be coached using a combination of thought and business frameworks to help him strategize and then create, execute, review, and refine his operations plan in a structured manner that covers his complete journey from the time he gets an idea till he has created a growing company. Because you will, in your journey from an idea to establishing a company, will go through at least 5 or 6 critical stages where chances of failure become very, very high. So what is our solution? We have created a 5 chasms journey business evolution framework that leverages well-established international as well as proprietary business frameworks that we have developed to help the entrepreneur convert his ideas into a successful company. This is the 5 chasms framework. We'll go a little deeper into it as we go through this webinar, just to give you a sense of what are you going to face. And there are essentially following critical stages. Customer development. Prior to that, the whole, how is an idea a great opportunity or not? Figuring that out. Then getting initial set of customers developed. Next is going to the next stage and building a full product and then extending your market. If you succeed at this stage, the next is discovering your business model. This is very critical. Your business model at a very, very high level has 3 things. It has your very sharp definition of value proposition. What is it that you're going to give to the customer that is going to make him spend money for your product? So there has to be a clear revenue stream defined at this stage, and systems and processes to run your business. If you've done this, now you have actually reached a stage where you're going to go to the main market, and therefore your real go-to-market strategy starts there. And as your go-to-market strategy succeeds, you will then get to a growth stage. Startups fail at each of these stages. These are very critical stages where if you don't use frameworks, if you don't use business tools, the likelihood of failure becomes very, very high. Because it is very difficult to structure thoughts and create crystal clear plans which will succeed. So what is it that we offer to start, businesses? We have 3 different ways of engaging with entrepreneurs, and very often in combination. Workshops. This is a workshop. You're attending an online webinar. Before COVID happened, our business also changed because of COVID. We used to do offline webinars, workshops. Close to 3,000 entrepreneurs have attended our workshops. We then do one-on-one coach insight. This is a typical exercise which lasts for about a month. And here we pick up any specific problem that you have. It could be your go-to-market strategy. It could be your funding strategy. It could be preparing your pitch deck. It could be examining your idea and helping you figure out if it's an opportunity and how should you encash it. It could be your growth strategy. You've got a go-to-market strategy, but your numbers are not increasing. So we can come in at that stage and help you figure it out. We also do end-to-end deep coaching, which is where we get deeply engaged with startups and we handhold them right through the entire journey that we have shown you here, the idea to execution. Irrespective of whatever stage they come in, we help them develop their business strategy, create an operations plan, and then run the operations plan with them from the outside by keeping a weekly or a fortnightly intervention where we sit with the entrepreneur, look at what has happened, and help him course correct. If he's hitting the numbers, great, we move on to the next step. We press the pedal a little more. But if he's not hitting his numbers, then we sit with him and help him figure out. So we literally become his executive team till such time he can actually he has the money to hire an executive team. The core team. My name is Ravi Challu, 42 plus years of experience, have been a serial entrepreneur. I work with SME entrepreneurs as well as startups. Anupama is saying 17 plus years of experience from IIT Kanpur, has successfully set up 2 startups and exited. This is her 3rd startup. Sudhir Bhattacharya, 18 plus years of experience, has been in high technology product development, 8 plus years of co-founding 3 startups, exited from 2, he's into his current 3rd startup. Apart from this core team, we have a team of 12 domain experts and facilitators who step in for a specific assignment for a specific issue to help the entrepreneur. So the question, how is your startup going to be affected because of COVID? The first change is, please stop calling it a startup. Why should you start calling it a startup? Because there's an assumption around startup that it will get funded. I think this is the biggest disservice we have done to the entire startup community. The word to be used is uncertain business. How is your uncertain business going to be affected? Why is it uncertain? We'll get a little deeper into it. But please don't forget that it's a business. And why is it called a startup? We will get into that definition so that you can clearly distinguish, are you setting up a regular business? Because that will change how you'll get funded. Or actually you have a startup. So what is a startup? Let's kind of spend some time and understand that so that we will get the right context. It's a business with an uncertain future. Never forget this. I really want you to, when this statement is seen completely, I want you to print it out and stick it in your room so that you see it every day. Set up for addressing problems a customer is facing in a job he's attempting to perform or wants to perform in a manner no one has addressed earlier. So this is what you'll hear investors asking you, how are you different? What are you innovating? That innovation lies in this one statement, that you are solving the problem in a manner no one has addressed earlier. It is different from how people have solved it. So if you see examples of Uber, Airbnb, Ola, Oyo, they solved the problem in a manner that nobody had done it earlier. Based on a set of hypotheses about how to address them. So there's a problem nobody has solved earlier. You make a set of hypotheses. That, okay, if I solve the problem in this manner, then I believe I will get traction with the customers. But you don't have data behind you to establish that. So you have to actually get into the market and start doing customer development and start testing whether your hypothesis is actually true. Is it really giving you the numbers that you thought it will give? This is why it is uncertain. You are solving a problem in a manner no one has addressed earlier based on a set of hypotheses. If the problems are addressed successfully and the startup is generating revenues within a defined business model, it should have the possibility of generating humongous profits in the foreseeable future. This is the key operating phrase for what is a startup and how is it different from a regular business. A startup is solving a problem in a manner no one has addressed earlier based on a set of hypotheses, and it has a possibility of generating humongous profits in the foreseeable future. So please go back and put this to test in your idea or your business. If you are not solving it in a manner that nobody has addressed earlier, and it does not have opportunity of making humongous profits in foreseeable future, it is not a startup. You will not get funded by VCs. The change that has happened because of COVID is that more and more companies, investors have started investing on revenues, that you need to have revenues. What they're really saying is that it needs to start looking like a business to us. And they want to see that you have enough cash runway so that you are not gasping for finance. You're not of your own money just to survive. You're not going to get funded. Or you'll get funded at crazy terms where you'll just lose your company. So how has it affected the business, this downturn? I think it's important to kind of spend time on that. I took you through the 5 chasms framework very quickly. The problem is that this customer, we don't know his behavior now. You see this lady with a question mark. We don't know how her buying behavior is going to change, because it really doesn't matter whether you're a B2B, B2C. So just to give you an example, let us say you make software for you make an ERP software for plastic bottle manufacturer. Okay. And this lady is considering whether she should buy this shampoo from Hindustan Levers. And what she finds is the consumers find that Hindustan Lever shampoo is far more expensive than other alternatives, and she stops buying Hindustan Lever shampoo. So when this accumulates across the country, HUL is going to find that their shampoo sales have dropped. And as a result, they will stop ordering as many bottles from the bottle manufacturer. So the plastic bottle manufacturing industry is going to go down. As a consequence, your ERP for plastic bottle manufacturing software is going to get impacted. So this is how consumer behavior is going to affect the entire supply chain, and you will have to do examination of whatever you're doing and think about how is it going to get affected because of changing consumer behavior. Because investors will see that they are becoming they're doing far more see you're not prepared with your analysis, they're not going to fund you. So they have become more and more cautious. So 5 key areas of business: finance, customer, operations, people, infrastructure. The focus now is on cash and not profits. Investors want to see how much cash do you have. How much cash do you have for how long? 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. This becomes very important, because if they see you have cash only for a few months, their takeaway will be that you are now wanting money just to survive, to run your operations. So you need to start planning this right away, that you need to have a long runway. What our estimates are that you need to have runway till at least first quarter of next year, which is 9 months. Your effort with customer will change. You will have to pay a lot of attention. You'll have to pay a lot of attention to retaining, reactivating, and discovering customers. A lot of your time. So don't cut down on marketing spend. So you will have to start looking at your costs, start cutting your costs, start looking at what can you reduce, try to drive efficiency in your operations so that you have a longer cash runway. But don't compromise your costs on discovering and retaining customers. Same for people. Figure out how are you going to retain and re-engage, because it has changed. People are going remote, they're working from homes. We don't know when offices will start working again smoothly. So investors are going to look at your business model and evaluate, have you designed your organization for remote working? If you have not done that to your business, you are not going to get funded. The other thing they will see is how much are you planning to spend on your infrastructure, on computers, on offices, on furniture, and stuff like that. Because they will expect you to optimize that cost. So if renting computers is cheaper than buying computers, plan to rent. This is the kind of financial prudence investors are looking for. How are you looking at your business from these 5 perspectives? Guys, if you have any question, you can type it in chat, and Anupma can prompt me, because I will keep answering questions as you ask. I'm going to pause for a few minutes just in case you have questions. Okay, I guess no questions, so moving on.
Sorry, Ravi, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yes, hi, this is Shazia. I just wanted to understand, you said that VC may not fund unless, startups or business with uncertain future, right? But we've seen that there are a lot of copy ideas, which have been replicated from overseas or from any other, states, have actually been funded heavily. So what is it that is the mantra, in terms of, getting VC funding primarily?
Got it, Shazia. So let's understand. I need you to look at this place. I got three horizontal arrows going, right?
Yeah.
So first arrow is bootstrap crowdfunding. This is your friends and family funding, right? From idea to opportunity till you start getting some customers, and then you build it to a product and you have a decent customer traction. So try to fund till that stage, because your ability to raise money here is going to be challenged. It's going to be very difficult. To answer your question about how come people are copying what's happening abroad, so and are getting funded here. So let's understand, what does innovation mean? Innovation means that you are actually doing something different in terms of solving a problem nobody has solved in a specific geography or for a specific customer segment. So these two last phrases people don't understand. These are usually missing in your understanding. And so let's understand, when Amazon started selling books in US, nobody was selling books online in India. So it was a new geography. So nobody had solved that specific problem in a new geography called India. And Flipkart did that. And they got funded. And then from there on, Flipkart became a wider e-commerce platform. Have you heard of Meesho? Meesho.
Yeah.
Meesho is a copy of Flipkart, but they have focused on tier 2, tier 3 towns, where Flipkart did not have same level of presence. So Meesho became successful in tier 2, tier 3 towns. They went to a new customer segment and a new geography. It's very interesting because there is a startup here. There is a SME and a startup we are coaching who sells on Meesho, and the customer he sells garments on Meesho, and they sell garments on Meesho, and their customer segment, price segment is completely different from what you will see on Myntra or what you will see on Flipkart. And when we get to B2C businesses, we have a criteria of segmenting which we call socio-economic class, SEC, where we figure out customers with different incomes and different culture. How is their buying behavior changing? So you could succeed with an idea in a different customer segment or a different geography, assuming nobody has already gone there. If somebody, now, for example, if you try to set up another Meesho, chances of getting funded are low unless you have something different than Meesho is not doing. So you have to bring in some differentiator which will give you some marketplace advantage. So externally to you, you might say that, oh, here's another startup doing something which already is being done. But you'll have to get into their business model and start figuring out what are they doing different. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Ravi.
Okay.
Sir, Monica has question here. How to identify the initial bootstrap funding requirement? Shall we start with the funding requirement for a few niche products, and later, once we have customer traction, then start adding more products?
Okay, so give me a minute. Let me find a Monica. Can you tell us what do you do?
Yeah, hi Ravi, Monica this side. Good morning.
Hi Monica.
Actually, currently I'm in idea to opportunity phase. I am planning for a handicraft business, especially in the utility sites, because everyone is selling handicrafts as they are making. But in utility, only a few websites have started, but again, they have very little ideas or little products. But in international markets, I have seen that they have a lot of utility requirements and everything, but they are just plain handcraft, not paintings or, I mean, we can give an Indian touch to it and make a product out of it.
Okay.
But there is, it's a very big, it's a very vast thing because we have so many utility products. I mean, how to start? And shall I start with some niche products? So the bootstrap funding has to be according to that. I'm just confused right now because if I think of more utilities, I have to have more bootstrap funding.
Got it. So let's take a different situation. So let's think of a housewife who's got 1 2-year-old child. She's got a 4-year-old child. Her cook has not come that day. She's also cooking. She's also trying to manage this children who are at home, and in the meanwhile, she's also got her laptop open and trying to learn about handicrafts. What will happen? Do you think she'll succeed at managing all 4 activities? Monica, that's a question for you.
Yeah, both the kids have a different requirements. So I mean, kitchen, then different requirements of kid. It's gonna take some time.
Can she manage all 4 simultaneously?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can she manage all 4 activities? That is, attend to the 2-year-old, attend to the 4-year-old, keep cooking, and also open the laptop and keep reading about handicrafts?
No, I don't think so.
Why is that? Because her mind share is going to be on 4 activities and she will not be able to give enough attention to any one.
Right.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah.
How your mind share, the more you spread it across product categories, more products, more customer types, what's going to happen to you?
I'm going to lose the focus and curation will not be that good.
Absolutely. That is why we say when you're moving from idea to, if you see the stage, what have we written here? Feature/MVP. Minimum value proposition. Start with the most smallest product feature that will help you get customers. And once you have stabilized that, then you start moving to the next stage. It's like, let's say you're a kid, 6-year-old kid, and you want to say that, I want to learn skateboarding, but I also want to start participating in competitions. You still haven't learned skateboarding. And this is business. This is far more complex. Skateboarding, at least you will see where you're going to skateboard. In business, you don't even know where the customer is, how is he going to behave. So there's a lot of learning to be done, which you cannot risk. Therefore, you don't ever do too many things, ever. You do things at a time, you figure out an idea to opportunity stage, which is the best thing to start with. Answers your question, Monica?
Yeah, got it, Ravi. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next.
We do not have any further questions, sir. We can move next.
Yeah, I'm going to the next. So if you remember, I had mentioned that it doesn't matter if you're a bottle manufacturer, consumer behavior, if it affects Hindustan Unilevers, you supply bottles to Hindustan Unilevers, if you're a software provider to bottle manufacturers. If the bottle manufacturer's business is going to get affected because of end consumer behavior, your business will get affected. So the question you have to constantly ask yourself, and this is what VCs or funders will look for. How are you going to be creating and maintaining a customer? And can you deliver a product and a service at a cost less than what the customer is expecting? Very fundamental. Because if you can't create and maintain a customer and you cannot maintain cost advantage, the chances are your market will not grow. So this is what investor will also ask you. He will ask you in different shape, different form, but this is what he's going to be looking for. So what is changing in the consumer behavior that will affect your business? And you will have to actually start factoring this in so that when you present to investors, this shows up. So what is your customer's perspective on cash? Is he in cash preserve mode? Are you supplying an essential item to him? So for example, one of the startups we have coached is into apartment maintenance business. Now, come what may, apartment maintenance can't stop. So he's an essential service. He's not going to get affected by COVID. Probably he's going to get more business because apartment associations will now want him to sanitize the areas, do much more than what he was doing. The other thing you have to see, okay, how have your customers' needs changed and wants changed? You have to ask these questions because these are difficult questions to answer. And we are coaching a startup which is into dental aligners, and we are now taking them to an angel investment. In fact, they've had some degree of success talking to a few angel investors. We had to completely recast his strategy because of COVID. Because we realized that people who need dental aligners will not come so easily to dentists. So we had to understand so that strategy could be recast. How will his usage and expectations from your product change? So if we take the shampoo example, if you come out with a shampoo that is more longer lasting, lesser quantity be used per wash, you have a differentiating advantage which you can push to the customer. We do a very detailed need analysis in our frameworks. You will actually get to know more about this in Idea to Opportunity webinars, where we help analyze whether the need is critical or aspirational, latent or latent. So give you an example. Hand sanitizers, till such time COVID crisis hadn't happened, were aspirational. I know people who used to comment on anybody using hand sanitizer saying, "Arey, kya matlab, bar-bar you keep cleaning your hands like this every time? Do you really need to do this?" Today, the same thing has become critical because marketplace has changed. So the investors are going to look for this. Are you servicing a critical need? Are you servicing a blatant need? What kind of need are you servicing? Because people can figure this out. And if you're not serving an aspirational need, chances of getting funded are lower. I'm not saying you won't get funded. Maybe you have a compelling proposition where an aspirational need also needs to be met. So for example, salon services at home, requirement is going to go up. And it's an aspirational need largely. How is your customer going to get information about your product? So your investment in digital marketing, customer attraction is going to matter. Investors will look at these numbers. Investors will try to see how are you actually communicating to the customer. How is this behavior going to change? Will he continue to buy your product, buy more, buy less? You will have to have traction numbers, metrics to show to your investor that, hey, you know what? My product or service is still being bought. My numbers are still showing upward trend. Will you pay the same price or expect to pay less or more? Again, it depends on the situation. People were paying crazy prices for hand sanitizer about a month and a half back. People were buying bottles for 350, 400, 500 bucks, which now sells for 100 bucks. Where will he get your product or service? If you've been in offline sales business, you'll have to start thinking, how are you going to go online? My advice to every single entrepreneur is start looking at CRMs and automating your sales process. It's going to bring in tremendous efficiencies and it will make a difference in getting invested in. How will you get feedback about your product or service? Again, you have to have a very robust online mechanism. This will make a difference in your funding. Because these are the questions which investors will also be asking you. So get prepared for that. Then work environment at home is changing. And your employees are working from home, they're conducting meetings, closing businesses from home, they're learning new things online. So start paying a lot of attention to how can you upgrade your team skills by online programs. And again, if you have very visible capability building operations and activities, and you talk about them to the investor, this makes a difference. How prepared are you for gig workers? Makes a difference. Have you incorporated MOOC or online learning into your people strategy? Makes a difference. So you will have to start looking at these things, because this will ultimately drive your operations efficiency. It will bring down your costs, and you can position these things very, very strongly to investors. So very quick takeaways in terms of what you should plan for and provide for. Operations efficiency, demonstrable actions to prove that yes, your operations efficiency is improving. There's going to be increased demand for domestic suppliers over imports. So is your business going to drive that? Going to be a big plus. So what about workforce availability? Have you built in gig workers, remote working, online training into your business model? Going to make a difference. Those of you who are into manufacturing, can you shift your manufacturing into tier 2, tier 3 cities or rural areas where your workers had come from? From business perspective, logistics and hyperlocal delivery are growth areas. If you're still at idea stage, you can start exploring this. These are big businesses. We have coached, at least to my mind, at least 5 startups who have gone into hyperlocal delivery and have succeeded. 1 month's time. They pivoted overnight, got into hyperlocal delivery and did very well. I think one of them was from Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh, Bhopal. Aggregation and content will become more and more important. So building marketplaces which aggregate and communicating with the customer through content is going to become more and more important. You will have to start incorporating phones into your sales strategy. Investors will look for this. Cash availability, very critical. Every investor will ask you this question: what is your runway? How long can you survive? What have you planned to do over the 9 months for which you have cash? Because nobody wants to invest in helping you survive. They want to invest in helping you grow. Because that is what's going to give them returns. Helping you survive is not going to give them returns. So you have to be in a position to say, hey, I don't need money for surviving. I need money for growth. Here is my cash flow for surviving. Stop thinking venture funds, start thinking venture debt. Even VCs are more inclined, investors are more inclined towards venture debt. So how does venture debt work? Venture debt essentially works in a manner that it is given to you for a loan, a defined period as a loan on which you're paying interest. And if you are unable to pay installments or unable to pay interest, the investor has an option to convert the debt into equity. This is a much better way of getting your startup funded initially, or your business funded initially. Export opportunities to Europe and US are going to go up. High-tech opportunities in India are going to go up if Chinese industrial output are slow to rise. So if you're doing something which is, so for example, you create a business proposal where you say, hey, this is being imported from China, it's going to be very difficult. I'm going to set up this manufacturing in the next 2 months, and I need money to reach this stage. Chances are you'll get funded. So in India specifically, opportunities in chemicals, textiles, apparel import, manufacture, automotive, metals, products will rise because import from China is going to drop. I'm going to skip rest because this is really very detailed for people who actually, I have further slides which will help you understand this. So our startups getting funded. This is the list of startups who got funded in first week of May. This is Indian startup. Daily Hunt, $35 million. Pratilipi, $9.4 million. So you see what is the segment, what was the activity, what round and what raise. So number of companies, and this is a very interesting company, Nira. $2.1 million pre-Series A fintech company partnered with Federal Bank, basically helping Federal Bank provide digital credit anywhere, anytime. It's a great area to be in because people's ability to get money from banks, especially small loans in the range of 20,000 to 1 lakh, this market is going to boom. So if you're getting into it, if you plan to get into it, you will get funded. Biryani by Kilo got funded. So food is also getting, actually online kitchens are getting funded because restaurant business is dropping. EdTech is going to get funded. If you can find an area where you can actually create a niche for yourself, EdTech is a great place to be in. So idea is here to tell you that there are tremendous opportunities in funding also, in India also. Funding hasn't stopped, but funding has become very selective. And I will go a little deeper into what does it mean to going selective. So this is the list of startups which got into Sequoia cohort. Last 9, this company basically does site reliability engineering platform. Atlan is a data portable across 100+ destinations from BI tools to APIs. Tech company. Procol marketplace for agri-commodity bidding. So all kinds of startups are getting funded. If the investor sees something unique in your business, he thinks there's a great opportunity there, and he thinks in long term you'll make huge, humongous profits. Getting funded, getting accepted. This is the Techstar cohort. These were formed in first week May. The idea is to just help you understand that it is happening. Funding is still happening. It hasn't stopped. It hasn't come to dead halt. Now some funding patterns in US, very interesting numbers. So if you see in US, crisis effect has still not hit angels and seed funding. It's been rising. This is 2006. This is 2019. It's been rising, and see the numbers in 2020. 2020 already $1.6 billion worth of funding has happened for seed and angel funding. And number of deals is about 1,000 odd. And this is just Q1. So we still have to see impact for the second quarter, and we will find that out probably by end July, mid-August, mid-July, end July, as to what is the trend in the second calendar quarter. So since the global financial crisis in 2008, annual angel and seed deal counts have been growing. It was 1247 in 2009. It became 5058 in 2019. It is growing. Funding has not stopped. It will continue to happen. Deal values have gone up now. This is VC funding deals. Typically from the value has gone up from 1.5 billion to 10 billion. Sorry, angel funding. Q1 saw angel funding for 335 deals and $800 million. Seed saw 653 deals and value at $2 billion. So funding is happening. What will happen in April to June? What has happened in April to June? We will find out by mid-July, but it may slow down a little, but it will not stop. The most interesting information is that typically companies in US operate without VCs for much longer time. In fact, the median age of companies raising angel round is 3.2 years. They don't raise money till 3 years. Whereas in India, I find people, they have an idea, they start looking around, who will fund me, who will fund me. Each one of those guys who starts looking for money early in life forgets that he will end up losing his company by the time VCs come in. He'll be holding maybe 5% equity because everything else will be held by investors. So please don't try to borrow money before you've discovered your business model. Our sense will take you 18 months to 24 months of the time you start doing customer development till you discover your business model and have decent run rates on revenue. And you have cash in the bank. You may not be making net profit, but you have cash in the bank and you're able to run your operations. So there's a difference in understanding. Typically in US, seed funding happens before angel funding. But in India, we actually confuse seed funding with what we call bridge funding. So, so the terms are different in India. So in 2009, the median age of companies raising seed was 1 year, but today it's almost 3 years. So this means companies keep working on their own cash till such time it starts looking like a business. And fundamental rule of business is that you should not need to borrow money for operations. You should not need, I'll change that. You should not need to part with your equity for running operations. Operations should be funded by debt. Growth should be funded by investors. So what does it mean to get growth funded by investors? It means that when you want to open more offices, you want to create new service lines, you want to create new product lines, you want to hire teams, which is not part of your regular operations. That's where growth funding comes in. So VCs will start looking, investors have already started looking for how sound are your operations. Will you be able to run on your own? If they find that you are struggling to stay afloat, chance of funding is going to be low. Moving on. Sectors that are getting funded, life sciences growing, fintech growing, AI funding growing, software growing. EdTech, home delivery is now catching up. Quickly, what are the opportunities? Healthcare, life sciences, cloud infrastructure, marketplace aggregator platforms, remote working, EdTech, logistics, hyperlocal, fitness, wellness at home, automation, digitization, digital marketing services, digitizing the restaurants, for example. Can you help every restaurant that is not operating today create a cloud kitchen? Shifting low-tech manufacturing of snacks, prepped foods, apparels, etc. to rural India. Great opportunity. You're going to make a lot of money very, very quickly if you do this. Rural call centers, BPOs, sanitizers. I would take sanitizers off the list because too many people are jumping into it. PPEs, sanitizers, and it's going to become a big money game because this will mean people who are capable of setting really big lines, people who are capable of manufacturing 1 lakh masks a month will probably survive. There are a lot of big players getting into this. Reliance has converted one of its factories into a mask factory. Now imagine competing with the Reliance on masks. So, will early stage funding become more difficult? Yes, it will become a little more arduous, but it's not stopping. 90% of all startups will either never receive angel funding or venture capital because they will shut down because they did not do proper thinking through and modeling at the ideas to opportunity stage, and then at the customer development stage, and then at product market fit stage. Because unless you create traction, unless you have revenue numbers, chances of getting funded are zero. The startups, our understanding of startups is businesses that have uncertain future because they're solving a problem in a manner nobody has solved before. And if they do that successfully, they have an opportunity of making humongous future profits. Now, traditional investment systems don't have a provision for funding this. They can fund traditional businesses, banks, NBFCs. They can fund traditional businesses. Nobody can fund risk businesses like this except angel investors and VCs. Because banks, etc., cannot calculate risk of default. And they don't have collaterals to de-risk their business. But VCs build that into their model. They're okay with 6 or 7 businesses startups out of 10 failing as long as 3 give them fantastic returns. So that's your best bet, provided you have reached stable operations and a top line state. That means you can run operations without requiring funds from anybody. The angel investors, etc., really help you then grow because they're smart money. They have connections and networks. They can take you to the next round of investors where that investor can actually help you grow your market. So what has happened is that the due diligence has increased. VCs, investors have become more and more particular, looking at your operation, looking at your financial planning, looking at how you're growing, looking at your founding team, how strong is the founding team. They take longer time because they're doing more due diligence. So please don't assume that if you start looking for funds today, you're going to get it in a month or two. Our experience with the dental aligner company who we are helping fund it has been at it for 3 months now. And it is the 3rd month in which they've started getting active engagement from angel investors. They're trying to raise 2 crores. My sense is they'll probably succeed by mid-July. So it's going to take them 4.5 months to get it. Because after an investor says yes, he's going to start his due diligence process and the negotiation process. So just getting money today, angel investments, will take you 4 to 5 months. From the time you start and assuming you have a operationally, financially stable company. So financial viability and cash runways are becoming very important factors. So, and for this, it's very important that you start looking at your, forget the term startup, please start calling it business. Do I have an operationally stable business that now needs money to grow? If you don't have that, you will waste a lot of time trying to get funded and you won't get funded. And what that will do is it will take your attention away from running your company on a day-to-day basis successfully. Whenever you start, 30% of your time is going to go into just chasing funding opportunities. And I'm assuming you're at least 2 or 3 founders. Where one founder starts dedicating 30-40% of his time to just get funded. Valuation is seeing a downward trend. That means investors are taking a larger share of your equity. Therefore, you becoming financially more and more stable and being in a position where you can tell an investor, hey, I don't need to get funded just to run my company. I need to get funded for growth. Otherwise, you're going to take a lot of hit on your valuation and you end up giving more of your company. Okay, very quickly. I'm going to skip this slide. This is going to take me time and it's not really required at this stage. But this really takes you through how do you actually look at your opportunity and analyze it. So very quickly, we use a framework called Customer Jobs Framework to analyze idea to opportunity. And then we use the needs framework to figure out where do you fall, what is the nature of need, and to service that, what is the nature of problem you will need to solve. The idea of including this slide here was that you need to think through what you're doing in your business very, very deeply so that you can position the entire business very strongly to an investor. So I'll move beyond this slide. So I'm again going to repeat the definition for you so that I think Monica had asked me a question, if I am not mistaken. Monica had asked that question. No, hang on. Shazia had asked that question about companies just copying models. So here's a definition from government which I found is very, very effective. So as per Ministry of Commerce and Industry notification 2015, startup is an entity that is innovating, developing, deploying, and commercializing. Please note the 4 terms: innovating, developing, deploying, and commercializing. The first 2 terms, innovating and developing, imply that they don't exist. These solutions don't exist today. You have to think through differently. You have to develop it. Once you develop it, then you have to deploy it, which means find the customers who will take your solution. And after you deploy successfully, then commercialize it, get money, get revenue, and create systems and processes to run your company. And what can you innovate, develop, deploy? It could be a new product, a new process, or a service, which is driven by technology. So building an app to deliver new services, technology. Or IP, you're doing a process in a totally different manner and have an IP on it. So this is the base definition. To that we have added, you can take something that is existing in another geography or another customer segment and launch it in a new geography or a new customer segment. That too is a startup, because you'll face different problems. Nobody has solved that problem in those areas for that customer segment and in that geography. This is what will get immediate attention of smart money. This is what investors will be checking. Are you innovating something? Are you developing something that's new? Are you opening a new geography or a new customer segment? Is that large? Can the investor with his money help you grow? Those are the questions they're answering. And in case of new geographies, customer segment, they will see you as a merger or an acquisition opportunity. And they will want to merge you with one of their existing portfolio companies. It's a great opportunity to be in. Okay, very quickly, you will have to kind of figure out, will your idea truly disrupt the market? Because if it's not going to disrupt the market, it's not a startup, it's a regular business. Or you're just going to make sustainable improvement. That is, it already exists and you're doing some sustainable improvement. It will give you maybe 6 months advantage, but then your competition will start catching up. Or you're just going to make something happen faster. So for example, if you see the fight between Zomato and Swiggy, it's all about driving efficiency. Zomato does something that makes it more efficient, Swiggy copies it. Swiggy does something which makes their delivery more efficient, Zomato copies it. So your competitive advantage can't be maintained for very long. So you need to have this clarity before you even approach funders. What are you really doing in the marketplace? What is your solution doing? But what if you're not different? You're like somebody else, it's a regular business. Then what you'll have to figure out is this: what will be your competitive strategy? Will you compete with the incumbents? Will you enter bottom of the market? Or will you discover new markets? What will you do? Unfortunately, what has happened is that this social distancing has complicated this market further. So most investors will start looking at how will your go-to-market strategy work online? How will you reach your customer by going online? And by going online does not mean that you start creating online products and services. All it means is, can you reach your customer online? So for example, if you say you're going to actually work with the farmers, you'll have to have a very strong proposition as to how are you going to reach the farmers. You'll have to start thinking about this. I'm going to skip this slide. This is about marketing. Okay, just to sum up, do you have a compelling breakthrough opportunity is the first thing investor will look at. And this is becoming more and more important. Are you picking up a big fight? If you're not picking up a big fight, investor is not going to look at you, because he's not going to make humongous future profits, which drives valuation. Are you creating a large sticky community? If you're not, again, investor will not look at you. He wants to see a large market. He wants to see a large user base. So are you creating a differentiated opportunity is something that investors will actually look for. I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions.
Ravi, I've asked a question to the host. Should I read it out here?
Please do.
Yeah. So, we talk about, going at the right time to market, or sometimes, early to market, and maybe as you said, depending on the idea, how are you implementing it in a new way in the new geography? That could be the possible, journey for that idea to take. So how does one exactly determine if the idea is early for that geography or the right time, considering that we do not have enough research data or the survey data that points out in that particular direction? So how do you end up determining that?
So Shazia, there are methods of doing this online. There's a lot of market research testing that you can do with very low cost. And basically we take small. So first of all, we make some assumptions about our customer segments. that these are the customer segments who will initially buy my product. And we start doing small, campaigns online to figure out how is that market segment responding to my value proposition. And there are techniques and methods to do this. But you should be very clear what is the nature of need that is it aspirational, is it critical, is it blatant, is it latent? Because without that understanding, it will be very difficult for you to design your market research tests. But it is possible, Shazia, you can take this online, and Facebook is a great platform to do this. It will give you your initial sense. It will not be 100% accurate, but you'll get a general sense, 70-80% that yes, this makes sense. Or you will clearly get a sense that no, this doesn't seem to have traction. If it doesn't have traction, it could be because of two reasons. A, you did not define your value proposition correctly. So maybe you need to go back and rethink how it should have been, how the campaign should have been designed and what should have been the message. And but if the messaging looks good, and but still the customer, so for example, if prospects are responding to your campaign, but they are not going to the next stage, so your campaign is drawing the attention, but value proposition is not strong enough for them to click through. So you start getting that sense. There are ways of doing this.
Right.
Any other question?
Hey, hi Ravi, this is Rupesh.
Yeah, Rupesh.
Hi. So my question is regarding, like, everywhere in all PPTs and everywhere people ask what problem you are solving and how your customers were doing it earlier. That kind of a question. Say, suppose if I try to apply for any kind of a VC fund or anything, when they ask me to fill some questionnaire, this is one of the major problem, that what problem you are solving and how people were doing it earlier. So is it necessary always that I'm solving any existing problem? What if they don't even know that this is a problem, or this can be done, or it can be beneficial for their business? They don't see it a problem, but there is some new way of doing it. So how to answer this kind of questions, that are you solving any problem? How people were doing it earlier? So how to answer this kind of question?
So Rupesh, this question really is not about, it really is about, hey, listen, if you're doing this differently tomorrow, is it, so, sorry, let me back off.
Okay.
So you need money for, actually I'll be covering this later also, but I'm very quickly going to answer that. You need money for, actually Rupesh, can you hold this till the such time I get into finance part?
Okay.
It will get answered.
Okay.
Any other question?
So we have a question from Mr. Shahid. How can we deal with investors who have developed cold feet towards the end of negotiation? We have had numerous discussion, due diligence, offer and counter offer on valuation. Now they have a cold feet stating COVID is making the market worse and better to conserve cash.
So, so here's the thing. See, just remember that all investors are driven by FOMO, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out. Because fundamentally, all VCs, angel funders, it's a risk capital. And they are hoping that they are risking, whatever they're risking today will give them humongous growth in time to come. So if some investor is backing out from your proposition, telling you COVID, runway, etc., the two things are happening. A, he does not have fear of missing out. That means he does not see your opportunity as something that is going to be large tomorrow. And please don't mistake me. I'm not saying that it is not large. All I'm saying is you have not managed to convince that investor that your opportunity is large. Otherwise, why will he miss out? If he's sure, he'll give you money. Because he would want to be part of that journey. Because that is his business. His business is to put risk capital so that he can get a great multiple. So the question you have to ask is, what is it that caused him to lose confidence? And I'm just going to make assumptions, but I think what you should do is probably get into a one-on-one conversation with us where we can go deeper into your situation and actually analyze with you what actually is going wrong. It may not be a simple problem, but do bear in mind that if the investor is not feeling FOMO, then you've not been able to convince him about how large your opportunity is. Baki sab, rest is just being polite, COVID, runway, etc. He's just giving you a very polite excuse. He can't tell you that, no, I don't see you as a large opportunity. Some investors are very blunt, they will tell you. But most investors are not blunt. And anytime that happens, you should actually do a closure call with them and understand what went wrong. So give it time, wait for a few days. Before actually, when they walk out, you tell them, hey, I understand, I respect your opinion, but can I have a closure call 3 days from now when you have had time to think about it? I also had time to think about it. वो दरवाजा खोल लो. 3-4 दिन के बाद get onto a phone and talk to them and find out what didn't work. And in any investor team, there will be one person who will be softer, who has been negotiating with you, who has actually led the deal, because it is in his interest to close deals. So spend time with him and ask him. Hope that answers your question. And if you need to go deeper, please connect separately with us and we'll see how to help you. Anupma, any other question?
No, sir, we can go ahead.
Okay. I'm just briefly going to take you through the journey, what your journey will be like. This is a curve we actually swear by. This is how your sales will grow. Initially, innovators will pick up your product. I'm quickly going to take you through this. And innovators look for novelty. Then the next type of customers that you will find is early adopters, and they look for competitive advantage. And then finally, early majority who looks for benefits. By this time, your business model should have been discovered. So customers buy only for following 3 reasons: novelty, competitive advantage, and benefits, or combination. Why is this important? Very often you will find you started something and it started selling, but then it has flattened and it's not growing. So that means your customers, innovators, you're not finding any more innovators, and you now need to find early adopters, and you're not finding them, or your product is not giving competitive advantage. So you'll have to start examining, because you will have to be able to explain this to the investor. That why is it that your sales are not growing?
Ravi, Harsha here had a question.
Yeah, Harsha.
Ravi, I remember you telling that by the time you conceptualize your idea and bring it into a running business model, it should take close to about 24 months.
18 to 24 months, yeah.
So what my concern is, what if the situation by that time has changed and whatever you have conceptualized is no longer relevant at that period of time? That's the worry I'm having. So do you have anything to say about it?
So Harsha, if your concept is not valid within, let's say 18 months, then clearly your initial assumptions, business hypotheses would have been wrong. Wouldn't that be the implication? Or you just don't have enough customers for the problem statement that you had made.
Okay.
So when you do the initial idea to opportunity analysis, you have to start looking at alternatives at that stage itself. That, okay, if this market segment, so you typically, when you look at an idea, you will end up with 2 or 3 value propositions. And you prioritize them and you say, you know what, I'm going to go after this value prop. And if you discover that, you're not getting traction after 12 months, and it'll not take 18 months, you'll find out within 6 to 9 months that you're not getting traction, then you pivot to another value proposition. By that time, you'll have enough experience in the marketplace to find out what's not working.
Okay, got it. Ravi, I remember that you once shared a slide of the job map where you had different stages of I mean,
nine stages of a job. Unfortunately, we won't have time to cover it here, but that's an idea to opportunity webinar, and it's a full two-hour webinar.
Okay.
It's going to take me too much time, and I will miss very important material here, and I have only half an hour.
Sure. Okay, we can take that off.
You can connect separately with us, and we can have a conversation.
Sure.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to skip this also because I have largely covered this in my conversations with you guys. The 5 CASMs: customer development, product go-to-market fit, business model discovery, go-to-market strategy, and growth. And we have frameworks for each of these stages to make sure that you successfully cross these CASMs. This is what we call idea to company gap. And bulletproofing your startup is really about a 5-stage systematic approach to coaching to help cross this gap. Okay, factors that will drive your funding strategy. So what is it that you wish to achieve in long term? Nature of your startup. This is now the new thing that is coming in. What early investors will be worrying about because of COVID? Then your ability to estimate the enterprise value of your startup becoming very critical. Otherwise, what happens if you're not prepared? You are left at your investors' mercy because you don't have at early stages a dependable method of putting a value. A lot of people will tell you use discounted cash flow. It doesn't work. You don't have enough financial history to do DCF. Then there are various frameworks for doing valuation. You'll have to be clear about which framework will make maximum sense for you at the stage you are at. You have to be very careful when you raise funds. If you try to raise funds too early because you didn't have enough runway, you end up losing a lot of equity. And by the time you get to a VC stage, you'll have just 8-10% equity in your hand. Not a good situation to be in. Because any investor will tie you down with very strict term sheets on milestones. And if you don't hit the milestones, he's going to remove you from your role and bring somebody in. This term sheet will allow him to do that. Most entrepreneurs don't understand finance. What are the right sources of funds and what is the right deployment of funds? What are the perils of devolution? What is the risk when you start raising funds too early? You will have to start thinking about this. Typically, you should look at any case studies. There are enough on the net. How did that company drive its funding? What happened to it? There are a lot of companies, you will have a lot of investors. There's this company called Zappos. Very interesting concept. This is the first company that started selling shoes online. Great idea. Investor went about it the right way, but by the time he went to VC round, he got kicked out. He didn't have enough equity in his hand. I want to go to this. This is very important because most entrepreneurs don't understand business finance. So I want to give you, what shall I say, business finance 101. So that you guys get ready for this, because without this understanding, talking to investors, being able to manage investors is going to be very challenging. So we also work with our startups, helping them raise funds. There are currently 3 of the various startups that we work with. 3 of them we have taken to funding stage. 1 is in garments, 2nd is in tea, 3rd is in dental aligners. All 3 have been in operation for 18 months and have revenues. Very important aspect. I mean, all 3 of them can continue their business as they are continuing with a decent growth rate. Maybe they'll grow at 10-15% and successfully keep running their business. Only 1 of them we are taking to the angel funding route, which is dental aligners. The other 2, we are taking them through a traditional debt project finance route. And it is possible. In traditional debt project finance route, you don't have to give equity. So both these cases will be, in one case, it will be funded by state government, in the other case, it will be funded by SIDBI. What do you need funds for is a question you have to ask yourself. So you need funds for setting up or proof of concept. The best source for you is family and friends for this stage, whether it takes you 1 month or it takes you 12 months. The next stage is R&D. This is when you start, so you've got some amount of customers, you did proof of concept, start looking for angel investors who help you grow your product to a stage where it becomes a full product. Our advice, don't even raise money at this stage. Try to complete the product yourself. You should really raise money only once you have discovered your business model. That is the only situation in which you will manage to retain a decent size of equity. Operations, go to bank. Don't go to investor for operations. Because if you've done the right amount of setting up, the right POC, the right R&D, your product is ready. The three examples I gave you, they don't have to raise money for operations. They're running it successfully. They make profit. The tea company makes some 20% profit today on their turnover. And they're already doing, I think, 1.92 crores. And when they go today to the investor, they can talk with such strength. So operations, money can be raised from banks, traditional financing institutions. The two startups that you told you that where we are taking them to traditional route need money for operations. We will take them to growth also, which is when we'll go to a venture capital. But we'll take them to a venture capital only when they have created a very strong financial base, where the venture cap realizes that, you know what, fear of missing out. This is a company that's growing. It can be large. I want to invest in it before somebody else does. That's the time when you get a best deal. Look at Reliance Jio. I mean, today for $1 billion, they give 1% and they get $1 billion. That's the kind of strength. So your first role is to understand financial management. What is financial management all about? So most entrepreneurs, in fact, most people confuse finance with accounts. The two different things. Accounts is all about recording transactions and doing compliance. Finance is not equal to accounts. Finance is all about how capital is raised, invested, and optimized to meet business objectives and goals. And it's a science. That's why CFOs have become very important for organizations and get tons of money. You must understand following three financial statements. You must understand assets very well, balance sheets very well. Your income statement. And you should be doing this month-on-month basis. The third thing which nobody does, including SME entrepreneurs, is the statement of cash flows. Please read up. There is so much on the net. You can just educate yourself. You don't need to be a CA or a BCom to be able to do this. Go to Investopedia and there is so much you can learn just there. So what do these statements help you do? So cash flow management, working capital management, liquidity. How long is your company going to be liquid? This is what will decide your runway. If you don't do liquidity management, you will have no control over your runway and you will struggle. You will look for money just to survive and it's not going to be available. Profitability, at least be operationally profitable, which means your day-to-day operations are getting paid by your revenue. You don't need money to run your company. Then sustainability and longevity. This is all about asset liability management and risk management. For example, if you borrow too much and end up giving too much equity out or over leveraged, you lose your company. All these three things have to be thought about and you can learn about this. So understanding working capital is the key. Broadly, the difference between your current assets and current liabilities is filled by working capital. You will either borrow it from bank or you will bring in your own money or you will bring it from a non-banking finance corporation. The money has to come from somewhere. don't end up borrowing working capital from VCs, because you're giving equity for something that you don't need to give. Traditional financial organizations can fund this. So if you don't understand this, how do you track working capital? How do you track cash management? How do you do cash management? You're going to end up borrowing money every time you run out of money. So profitable with 3 concepts in mind. Track cash flows, that is cash inflow minus cash outflow. And this is not borrowing. Please don't mistake this for borrowing. Cash profit, which is operational profit, and accrual profit. Accrual profit is what reflects in your P&L at the bottom, which means this is not cash in your bank, but this is the profit that has accrued in books, because there will be credit given in the market and your vendors will be giving you credit. So it's only in the books. The key part is cash profit. This is what determines your survival. If you run out of cash, you will have no money to pay for your expenses. A very quick look. Look at your asset liability management in this manner. So your liabilities are your net worth plus accumulated profits plus long-term loans. Okay, and this will actually go into assets like land, building, property, plant, furniture, etc. These are your long-term deployment, long-term funding, long-term deployment. Then there is short-term funding and short-term deployment. This is really for, you know, your creditors, your financing your stocks, or discounting your bills, and this is your receivables and advances, funding inventory. So short-term funds go into short-term deployment. So when I talk about operational profits, I'm really talking of short-term funding versus short-term deployment. You should not need money for this. This should come from your business. If you do this successfully, you will end up not borrowing money from investors to run your company, which will actually create risks of losing equity for you. So please spend time and understand this. When should you raise funds? According to us, never. As far as possible, avoid raising funds. So very quickly, I mean, if you look at numbers, this is what's going to happen to you. You go through pivoting, prototyping, product development stage, you come to build business stage, which is business model, product, services, and then you come to growth stage. And your sales will climb accordingly. In the meanwhile, you are spending money, so your profits and losses, it will be losses for some time. This is what you have to fund. If you're able to fund your losses successfully yourself, there'll be a time when you'll stop making losses. And your investments will actually have peaks and troughs. And as you keep building, your risks will go down. This is what will give you valuation. Constantly keep assessing financial risks, and there are methods to do this. If you do this smartly, you will be able to negotiate better valuation from your investors. Our suggestion, keep bootstrapping till such time you reach the growth stage, which is you now need to get into different geographies, need to build more offices, need to hire teams, need to invest in marketing, stuff that you will not get funded for by traditional investors. Once you reach that stage, look for angel and seed funding, which will at least take you to, which will clearly establish your growth metrics. So if you go to a VC with growth metrics established, you'll get fantastic valuation without giving out too much equity. How do you figure out enterprise value? I think this is the key problem, because arriving at a mutually acceptable value becomes an issue. This is the investor, this is you, and you're really as innocent because you really don't understand this finance business. What you're thinking is, this is the equity you want to give, and this is the investment you're looking for. But the investor has a totally different view. He's looking for this as his equity, and this as his investment. Your goals are not aligned. He is not your friend. He is going to ride on you to multiply his money. So get out of this thought process that he's there to help you. No, he is there looking at you whether you can multiply his money for him. So he's going to maximize his equity and minimize his investment. Be prepared for it, because this will affect your negotiating capabilities. Figuring out enterprise value, some stuff you'll have to know. What is your identity? What is the job the customer is trying to perform? How do you help customers do the job? Have you got market validation? What is the market saying about you? What is the product and its features? How do you plan to make money? Who is your competition? How are you better than competition? How do you compete on pricing? How will the market adoption happen? What is the roadmap and traction? What are the financials? What is the marketing and sales plan? How do you plan to use funds? What is your funding and investor returns plan? Nobody thinks about this. But if you are prepared for it and you tell the investor, hey, this is how I've thought of giving you exit, and you will multiply your money 10 times in 3 years' time, he's already on your side. I suggest you take a screenshot of these questions, and those of you who are already reached the funding stage, try to answer these questions for yourself. I'll wait here for some time till you take screenshots. Okay, I'm assuming you've taken screenshots. There are 3 ways of arriving at enterprise value: fair market value, strategic value, intrinsic value. Let me quickly explain this to you. What this means is fair market value is you look at the market situation, you look at similar companies who are at your stage, or you know what they were, how they were valued when they were at your stage, and you use that as a method for valuing yourself. Strategic value. Let me illustrate through this as an example. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a company called Zynga. Zynga was an online gaming company which had designed games exclusively for Facebook users. Became highly successful, and till they had 60 million Facebook users on their platform. And this is where Facebook got worried, because they were now thinking that if anybody bought this company, 60 million users would actually start spending time away from Facebook. So Zynga had a strategic value for Facebook, and they bought it at some crazy valuation. WhatsApp, again, strategic value, $22 billion for a company that didn't have a single rupee of revenue, because there were huge, Facebook's Messenger was not successful, and WhatsApp had huge, humongous customer base. So therefore it became imperative for Facebook to buy that company. Strategic value. Intrinsic value. We see this happening a lot in the machine language space, where a small team which has got a domain expertise quickly builds a set of algorithms which solves a specific problem. I have seen teams of 4 or 5 people building, working for 12 to 18 months, building a very, very niche product for a specific vertical, and selling it for $10 million, $15 million. So $15 million between a bunch of 4 or 5 guys is $3 million per person for 18 months work. A fantastic value. Intrinsic value, because those companies who have that gap in their product line see it as something that can immediately help them get value. So that's intrinsic value. Very quickly, these are various valuation methods. You can take a screenshot. Really, what is meaningful for you probably is going to be the similar companies method. So what will actually make a difference? Estimating the intrinsic worth of your startup, experience of the founding team, nature of innovation you're doing, find opportunities where incumbents do not exist or cannot go. So example, Flipkart, Meesho. Flipkart will have to change its business model to start competing in tier 2, tier 3 towns. And for an established company to change its business model is never easy. So that gives you space to work then before somebody big starts coming after you. Competing with non-consumption, go to new geographies, go to new customer segments. Leveraging disruptive strategies to compete with incumbents. Working on latent or blatant critical needs and not aspirational needs. Create differentiated value propositions from day one. You should have established product market fit at least before you actually approach for money. Otherwise, valuation will not be to your liking. Creating a disruptive business model. Creating a revenue model that generates life cycle value from a customer. That is for the entire life, the customer keeps paying you. So most of these hosting services are that. Every year, without fail, without any marketing effort, you end up paying next year's hosting charges. Fantastic business to be in. Very low marketing cost. All managed by tech. So that's the end of my presentation. Rupesh, I want to come back to you and ask you if your question got answered in the finance module.
I think, I'm sorry, I just was not, maybe, I was away for 5 minutes in between. Maybe you have answered that point.
Okay, so why don't you repeat your question, and then we can actually answer it for the rest of the people.
Yes. So actually, whenever we fill up any form or anything for VC, they ask, what problem you are solving and how your customer was doing it earlier. Is it always necessary to solve a problem? Can we not, have some, new services which they never aware of that can help in their business? I mean, B2B segment, So these are the services which they don't even know that could help them. So how to answer these types of questions, while to the investors?
So these are two different questions. The first question is about whether the future opportunity is going to be huge. Is it a big problem that you're solving? And the second question is, how will customer become aware about your product and its value?
Okay.
So when VC is asking you, are you differentiated? What are you doing different? Has this problem been solved earlier? So the first question you have to ask yourself is, whatever you're doing for the B2B customer, right? How is he doing it right now? If he's doing it manually and he does not, there is no solution existing. So clearly that is different. You're taking you're creating an online solution for something that is completely offline and manual.
Yeah.
But if it is already being solved by some other tech platform, and then it's a known problem. You're not doing anything new. You might innovate the process. You might innovate the revenue model. So, for example, if the earlier company is charging, let's say, per bill, you come out with a scheme that it doesn't matter how many bills. I have an annual subscription.
Okay.
Which is estimated at what's your spend for the year. If you're spending, let's say, X, your annual subscription will be 50% of X. So what you did was you innovated the revenue model and created a situation for the existing company where it will find it difficult to follow you because they'll have to change their business model.
Okay.
So that's how you're differentiated. Differentiation can be in product, in process, in service, in revenue model. It can be any one of these things.
No, okay. So, but what if it is a new service?
Which means it's being done manually and you're taking it online for the first time.
Yes.
Then that's the difference.
Okay.
That it's like, Redbus saying, hey, till we were not there, you had to go to an agent to book your ticket. But now you can do this sitting from your home.
Okay.
That's the difference. The next question is the opportunity large enough? Will it create tremendous future profits?
Yes, it does. Okay.
So then it's large enough. So you have to be able to prove to the customer that it is large enough, and what you need money is for really tapping that market.
Yeah, I'm actually at that stage. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Next question. Anybody? Anupma, any questions in the chat?
No, sir.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Hi, I have a question.
Who is this?
Yeah, this is Mo Shahid Khan.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a generic question. Do you have any views on how much equity should founders keep for key employees and for advisors? Is it 15%? Is it 20%? Which goes into the ESOP and for the advisors advisory pool? And I have a second question as well, if I may. Second question is, should the startup founders, especially the ones that are working full time, take a salary, or they should not? And if they should, is it 50% of their last take home? Is it 30%? Is it 10%? Or is it none? Is there any formula?
Okay, so let's answer the first question. Your first question was how much equity for employees and
advisors.
Advisors. So, so let me tackle this employees part first. So it is at the end of the day, you have to see it from how motivating it will be for the employees. For example, for your executive team, by the time you are in a position to hire your executive team, you would have got a decent valuation, right? Because by the time you're hiring an executive team, you probably reached a VC funding stage, and there is a way of predicting valuation of your company. And I'm seeing this as maybe 3 years down the road. So at that point in time, you have to start figuring out what is the future value of that equity that will attract that person. So because you're going to hire some professional who's already working somewhere and maybe has a salary of 50 lakhs of rupees, and he's in an established company, and there would always be the risk of walking out of an established company and working for a startup that's 3 years old, may be funded, but there is a risk. So you may offer him 50 lakhs, and then you will tell him, hey, there's an upside. I'm going to give you ESOPs, which in 5 years' time will be worth 10 crores to you. That's a very attractive number. That you're telling him you're going to give him 20 times his compensation in 5 years' time in his hand. So you have to do that maths, and there is no single formula for doing this maths. It will depend on who you're inviting onto your board. So for example, tomorrow, if you need to hire a CEO, to reach a stage, you got to hire a CEO. CEO is going to typically, depending on what is the size of your organization, and if you need a professional CEO, you're looking at 1 crore, 1.5 crore, 2 crore plus salary, plus sales commission, plus ESOPs. So unless he gets a package that becomes worth, at least the notional value is worth few crores, the chances are he's not going to join. So I don't think there is any standard formula, except you have to sit down, do the maths, and start figuring out what is the perceived value of that offer to that employee, which will cause him to continue to work for you. That's one part. Coming to founders. So as I mentioned earlier, the founders have to burn bridges to start a company, they have to stop thinking like employees. So you can't come with a condition that, 50% of my existing salary, you're still thinking from employees' mindset. In fact, the investor is going to tell you, take as much as you want, earn it. So very interesting. I happen to know co-founder of IndiaMart, an ex-IIT Kanpur alumni chap called Vijesh Agarwal. Very nice guy. They had same problem. The first time they got funded from Intel basically, whenever serious VC funding happens, it will pull in some really top-notch professionals to become your board members. So again, the two brothers, the Agarwal brothers, went to the board and said, hey, you know what, we want to decide our salaries. What do you think will be the right salaries? So the board said, okay, what can you afford and what do you want to draw? So it's up to you. You decide. If you say 3 crores, fine, 3 crores. Show us how you're going to generate that money. So what the investor will tell you, that take any reasonable amount of money that you can draw from your operations. If you can pay yourself, go ahead and pay yourself. We want you to be happy. So Shahid, it's all about how successfully is your business managing and generating cash. And you can pay yourself accordingly. And then there are ways of structuring it, which are milestone based. There'll be a base salary, there'll be a commission on top and bottom line, and there'll be milestone driven equity. I don't know whether you read this or not, that Elon Musk had a criteria that if his, in his term sheet, the investor had written that if his share value crosses $500, he would get paid a huge amount of equity as a consequence. So this is how it happens. Those term sheets turn very professional and it's completely milestone and performance driven. Does that answer your question, Shahid?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Monica has a question, working on market research right now, how to identify which products are fast moving as Max cites. Monica, difficult question. I mean, you can start guessing. You can probably do research to figure out traction. Where do you get more traction and where do you get less traction? And chase which gives you more traction. And as you start investing more and more into those product lines, you will start figuring out. My advice to you is take a financial view to your business. As long as your business is growing and you are financially viable, keep growing.
Thank you, Dem.
I guess there are no more questions, Anupma.
No, sir.
Hello. I will go off the call because I have to take this call. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And have a good day.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
everyone.
sir.
I will be sending
Thank
you
you.
one message that those who wants to get connected one-on-one with Ravi sir and with the BYS team, I will be dropping you a message on your WhatsApp for you, and you can call us. I can type my number here. So to reach out BYS team, you can reach out to this 2 number. Sorry, the last one is. Yeah, thank you so much, all of you.
Thanks.